Hey folks, Captain Jason here with Send It Charters, and I've come up with a way to run your torpedo weighted steel without using the fold over crimp and swivel technique. I developed this knot quite a few years ago. I run all Shimano products, and if you can see probably where the camera is here, but the level wind is so small that the crimp has trouble going through that level wind on the Shimano reels. So I had to figure out a way to make this line go through the level wind without having a hiccup, stopping. Well, we've all done it. We've all put a swivel, the crimp, the shrink coating on it, and it gets stopped once in a while. I just had to figure out a way to fix it. So what I did is I come up with a way to figure out how to make this line sleek enough to actually go through the level winds and not fail. And what I come up with is similar to a Chinese finger cuff, kind of like your lead core coating, your Dacron coating on your lead core line. But this stuff I use is actually called PowerPro Hollow Ace. It's the same as your PowerPro line. All your backing, most of us guys here in the salmon and the walleye markets are using PowerPro line for backing. Some use Suffolk. It's all a Spectra braid, not necessarily a Dacron where it's going to rot, but Spectra doesn't rot. This line's a little different because it's actually hollow on the inside, just like your lead core, but it's actually hollow and there's no stretch. So what I've done is, if you can see here with the camera views, is this steel, this 45-pound torpedo weighted steel that I have is actually inside of this Hollow Ace PowerPro. At the end I have a swivel, my leader, I'm ready to fish. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to tie the knot. Keep in mind, this knot is not to be tied on the boat. You're doing this at home, you're doing it in the garage. This is a pre-set up deal. You're doing it at the dock if you want. It takes a few extra tools to do this knot, but at the end of the day, the steel itself on the water is not going to fail unless you put it in a prop. Your prop, somebody else's prop. This steel is so tough and it's so strong, you can't kink it at once to stay straight, but a prop's only going to cut this off. You might break the whole system off or the whole setup off at the backing or lose a leader, but at the end of the day, the steel's going to stand strong and last you all day long and for the whole season for that matter. So one thing on the steel is you have to cut it with cutters, a regular pair of cable cutters. You can't use your pliers, you can't use side cutters, stuff like that. You have to actually use a cable cutter, and when it cuts real nice and true. Leaves a nice square edge on it, works out pretty nice. Next thing I have here is a Daho needle. This is actually a 41 thousandths ID Daho needle. It's a 100-pound test if you were going to buy one. These are all on the East Coast, West Coast. All the saltwater guys use this for running their wind-on leaders, but I found that this steel line actually fits inside this 100-pound test needle just right. You can slide that steel, drop it here. This steel will slide in to the needle fairly easy. Of course, the older we get, the harder it is to see, but it does go in that needle fairly easy. The thing about the Hollow Ace is this is actually an 80-pound test that I'm using on this particular size here. 80-pound test, when this knot is actually fully deployed and tied, it's almost 100% knot. We did a lot of testing with it. It's 77 to 78 pounds when it breaks, and it's typically, when you wrap it around a pair of pliers, that's where it breaks. It doesn't actually break at the knot we're tying. I do a little sheath here, a little edge. This is actually how we're going to tie the knot at the end. Push the material together, it actually hollows out, kind of like your rod socks do, and that needle will float inside that line. And now I just feed the line up through the hole, through the center of the Hollow Ace. Like I said, this is something you're not going to do on a boat. The waves, the action, with customers on board, it's just not going to happen. Fully deploy the needle, stick it out the side, and now what I've done is I've actually created my weighted steel to my hollow core, and then just popped out. But right here, if you take this just the way it sits, I can slide it easily this way. But if I go to pull it, it will not slide. It stays strong right there where it's at. But if you go at this end of the knot, you can actually slide it wherever you want. It'll slide up the line. So now what we do is try to figure out a way to make this knot stronger and it stays in place. So we get down here towards the end. Another thing about this steel is it's very sharp. It's got a burr on the end of it. So the next thing I'm going to do is, before I go to put it back inside the Hollow Ace, I'll take a little glue. This is actually a Zap-A-Gap fly tying glue. Put a little drop here on the end. And what it's going to do is it's going to take them strands of that glue, or the strands of that steel, and combine them together, and they won't come apart. Let that dry for a second. Fingernail file. You know, it's one thing you have to go to the hardware store or go to the beauty salon, wherever you got to do buy a fingernail file, but it's one of the things we're going to have to do on this, because what it'll do is, after that glue dries, you actually probably didn't see it, there's one little strand sticking out. I'll take this file and I'll actually file it into that round. Just takes a second, let that glue dry, file it round. Now there's actually no burr at the end of that steel. It'll stay strong and it won't actually break at this point. This line now can be slid on. You slide it backwards. Feed the steel back inside of itself. And now you've created a finger cuff with a tag end sticking out. And this is actually where your leader's going to go, or your backings are tied to this end. But this isn't enough, because if I take it right here, it'll actually slide off the end. So now what I do is I have a little jig here designed for doing this knot. It'll hold the steel tight at both ends. It's kind of like doing a bow serving. I'm sure there's a lot of hunters out there, a lot of archers out there who've gone to the bow shop and have your bow serving changed. The same knot at the end of this is what I'm going to tie. Have a Shimano bobbin, and I found this works the best. You can use an archery bobbin, but typically an archery bobbin has the line already on the spool. With a Shimano bobbin, for tying this knot, there's actually nothing here other than there's two little O-rings side by side, which you can pinch your line inside that. So you take your tag in you started with, run it down to the feeder hole in the center, and put it in between these two O-rings, which is just basically to tie the line to hold it tight, and you wind it on backwards. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually put a little serving right here, just like a bowstring, like an archery shop. Just tighten it up to make this knot so it can't come off. I do some coarse wraps real quick. 1/8 inch apart, give or take. And then I start winding it tight. Go over top of itself. I'm actually going to bobbin it on. Just go ahead and whip it. That knot right there is so strong you can't actually have those strands are so tight they will not come loose. What I've done is wound back over top of itself, kind of like you overwrap a ball bat. You actually put a couple of coarse wraps in a ball bat with tape, and you go back over it real smooth to make for the grip. Same kind of has little rolls in it, little knuckles. Now with the tag end, the same as the bowstring, I'll make some wraps over here on the side. I'm pre-wrapping it backwards. I take the tag end, lay it over top of itself, and make sure you're going to unwind these and wind it on tight here. Get all these unwound. And now what I've done is created a loop and wrapped over top of itself so I can pull the loop through. Pull the loop through, snug it up tight. Little tool here to tighten it up. Pull this knot tight. If you look, the knot actually got darkened just like the rest of it did. Take your tag end, cut it off. And now we've created weighted steel to hollow core, and now I can cut this wherever I want to put my tag end on for my leader. This particular rod here, at the end of it, I actually have a swivel. And on this swivel, it's going to be probably hard to see on the camera, but this swivel, there's actually no knot on that swivel. I've done the same thing with this swivel on here. What happens is a Palomar knot with this line will be actually slightly large at about the size of that swivel. But what I have done is, on my swivel end, I'll go up and I'll actually create one. If by chance it's the backing end, now I'll take my backing, tie my double uni knot both end to end. This is where my backing would go on, reel it up on the rod. But this end's actually going to be my leader end. Take my tag end, 18, 20 inches long, fold it in half, give or take, figure out where the middle point is. My swivel's going to go right here. I have another needle made by Daho in Toro Tamer out of California. This has actually a small crochet hook on it. It'll open up here. It's hard to see, but there's a little open end on it. This little open end will actually fold tight and go down to the hollow core. I take the same needle, go down to this line. I'm going to feed that needle right down the line, all the way down until it hits the end of the steel. So now it's steel to steel. I poke it out the sidewall of it. And now with the other half of the tag, I'm going to put my swivel on. I got a 50-pound Spro swivel here. Feed it through the eyelet. Now I'm going to take the tag in after the swivel, fold it in this little crochet hook end. And I'm going to pull this tag in right down the center of this hollow ace. Nope. First we'll do it on camera. Never fails. I'm going to pull the tag in right down the center of this. So now what I've created is a Chinese finger cuff again. The swivel is inside of itself. As I tighten this up, the tag end slides through. It's kind of like when you buy your dock lines. You already have the pre-loop at the end of it. I've just created a tight one, and now that swivel actually has no knot on the end of it. One of the first times I tried this, Captain Bobby Sullivan on the Icebreaker Charters ran a rod exactly like this and caught that large king. I mean, very large king, very big king, and had no issues with that. Like I said, this is 80-pound test hollow core. The testing we've done with this has been so unique, it's hard to describe how much we've tested this knot to figure out what the fail points were. When we first tried doing this knot, it would actually fail right here at the end of the steel because we weren't go through and take the burr off. Now what we've done is created a knot. This is actually a 100-pound, it's actually an 80-pound test line, 100% knot. If you use the weighted steel itself with a crimp on it, it's a 100-pound test. So it's not one of the things that's going to actually fail on the water. It's one of the things that's going to fail in time with a prop, kinking it, stepping on it. But for the most part, the nice thing about it is it wants to stay straight. It doesn't want to kink. And I got a little test here. I'm not sure if I can back up and try this or not, but I'm going to try it real quick while we're filming. This is a 300 steel, or 300 weighted steel. One of the nice things about it is it doesn't want to backlash. I can jerk that reel. It coiled up a little bit, but it pulls right out. And a little kink, of course, we're going to do on camera again, a little kink in it, but for the most part, it'll pull right out in a hurry. Okay? The next thing about it is, when you coil it up on the floor, you can put a 300 steel on the floor, you can engage the bail, you can reel it back up. If you do that with copper or lead core, you're probably starting over. You're probably putting a full reel spool of line back on it again. So, the knot's complicated, I understand, I get it. But if we can get some of the suppliers along the West Coast and the East Coast to have this tied up for you at the stores, it's going to be a great help. The other thing we've done at Torpedo is we've actually come up with it pre-terminated. It's not the same way I do it, it's close. I'll take one out of the package here. It comes 200, 300, and 400 pre-terminated with a piece of hollow core on the end of it. This is actually a 200 pre-terminated both ends. And this line here, compared to what I run, is a lot heavier duty. It's not quite as big as your line you have on a mainline planer board, but it's getting there. It's probably a 150-pound test. This is 80-pound test, and side by side, there's quite a comparison in size. But what we've done is we've taken this line on the weighted steel, and it's pre-terminated, coated with 5100 glue, and you have probably a 24-inch tag end to either put a swivel on, put it to your backing, put a leader to it. You can cut this several times before you get to the end of it. But you can actually buy this now in the stores and online, pre-terminated in 200s, 300s, and 400s. So if you think about getting into weighted steel, it's very inexpensive, but it's one of the things you can actually do to not have to worry about breaking off copper or breaking off lead core, having kinks, that kind of stuff. But that's what I've got for you today. Any questions? Get a hold of Captain Chuck's, get a hold of Jay's Sporting Goods, and get a hold of Frank's Great Outdoors. They're all going to carry it this year. On the walleye market, we're doing on the walleye side, we're also doing it for walleyes. I started that in marina, on Linwood Beach Marina where I'm out of, and it's a great success. Most of the captains now run the weighted steel in 40s, 60s, and 80s. Instead of running 2-color, 3-color, 4-color lead core, we're running weighted steel instead. It's easier to deploy, it's less line on the water, and less for our customers to reel in. So if you have any questions, get a hold of me. I'm Captain Jason, Send It Charters. I'm also on senditcharters.com. You also get me on Facebook. But thanks, guys.